Week 12 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few quarterbacks I looked at off the wire this week. The first guy, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. So the last few weeks, Jordan Love's starting to get things going and playing better after he had a couple bad weeks from week 5 to week 8. So the last few weeks here for Love, week 9 versus the Los Angeles Rams, 228 pass yards, a touchdown, 7 rush yards. Week 10 at the Steelers, 289 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 INTs. And week 11, a solid game versus the Chargers, 322 pass yards and 2 touchdowns. So right now, good matchup coming up Thanksgiving Day at the Lions, for the most part. Every Thanksgiving, the Lions playing. So right now, Lions give up the 9th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. Jordan Love, he's getting a lot of plays involved in the offense. Christian Watson even found the end zone in the Week 11 game. Jaden Reed, he's been breaking out the last few weeks. Romeo Doubs, he's had a great season. Luke Musgrave, so with a lot of decent weapons and young weapons around Jordan Love. And a decent matchup in a game where it should be up and down the field for the most part between both teams. He's an ad this week, available in 55% of fantasy leagues. Next quarterback's Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Baker Mayfield's coming off a bad game in Week 11 at a tough San Francisco defense, 246 pass yards, a touchdown, an INT, a fumble loss in that game. But a good matchup coming up for Baker Mayfield at the Indianapolis Colts. I give up the 16th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. So it's been tough sledding, no doubt about it, for this Tampa Bay Buc team, losing 4 out of 5 games now. But Baker Mayfield, for the most part this season, he's been solid, including from Week 8 to Week 10, 3 games in a row with 20 or more fantasy points. So after a bad game and a decent matchup coming up at the Indianapolis Colts, I think Baker Mayfield could go in there. He can make some plays. It's an indoor game. Him and Mike Evans have a great rapport. Chris Godwin has had a decent season as well. So right now, if you need a quarterback in deeper leagues, or if you got injuries or whatever the case, he's available in 52% of fantasy leagues. The next quarterback's Tommy DeVito of the New York Giants. DeVito, a few weeks ago, we saw him make his debut versus the New York Jets, where they were scared for him to throw the football at all. But the last 2 weeks, in Week 10 and 11, he's shown he has some arm strength and could actually get the football down the field. Week 10 at the Cowboys, 86 pass yards only, versus a very tough defense, but he had 2 touchdowns, an INT, 41 rush yards. And Week 11, a breakout game, 246 pass yards, 3 touchdowns. So Week 12, obviously it's not going to be that great of a matchup versus the Patriots that give up the 10th least amount of fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. But DeVito, obviously, is a deeper league option in 2 quarterback leagues. Cal fantasy owners, I believe, available in 97% of fantasy leagues. And he had good confidence, and at least he's been a quarterback over the last few weeks that's found the end zone with 5 total touchdowns in the time. The next quarterback, Will Levis of the Tennessee Titans. Will Levis, the last few weeks, he really hasn't done much. We know he's got good arm strength, but he plays behind a bad offensive line, and the numbers haven't been all that great for Levis, but he did come out of it a little bit in Week 11. 158 pass yards, 2 touchdowns in that game, and a fumble loss at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Week 12, a pretty decent matchup versus the Carolina Panthers. We know they're one of the worst teams in the league on the season, 1-9. And Will Levis has a big arm, and at least him and DeAndre Hopkins are making things happen. So right now, while he's available in 71% of fantasy leagues, Levis, like I said, I know he hasn't been playing great over the last few weeks, but it wouldn't be surprising to me in a pretty good matchup where he could bounce back and have a decent game. So right now, in deeper leagues, if you need a quarterback, Levis, like I said, out there in 71% of fantasy leagues. And the final quarterback I looked at off the wire is Jake Browning of the Cincinnati Bengals. Jake Browning now going to be the starting quarterback the remainder of the season. Joe Burrow, unfortunately, out for the season with the wrist injury. And Jake Browning, he does have good weapons over there in Cincinnati, but we'll see if he could make things happen and get the ball to these playmakers like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd mixing out of the backfield. So in relief in that Week 11 loss at the Baltimore Ravens on Thursday Night Football, 68 pass yards, a touchdown, and 40 rushing. So he showed some running ability. He took some chances down the field. He wasn't scared to throw that deep ball, was Jake Browning. And like I said, he might have some upside with a guy like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins in the offense, and Tyler Boyd. So right now available 99% of fantasy leagues. That's a few quarterbacks I looked at off the wire for Week 12 of the fantasy football season.